Greetings! It is I, Countess Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the various campaign settings of Dungeons & Dragons dating back from AD&D. And of course, we're continuing with Spelljammer, D&D adventures in space. Well, when we last left off, we were talking about the Phlogiston and space itself. Let's continue with the Phlogiston a little bit more, and then talk about air. Alright, the Phlogiston. Well, the fact is, because of the nature of it, which I talked about, being flammable, normally you don't have to worry about light. There is a light to the Phlogiston itself. But when you're in the depths of a ship, or some kind of structure that's traveling through there that might be larger, any kind of vessel that deep within it, it's dark. Magical lighting helps, or using more natural means. Things like phosphorescent bugs or moss that you might try to keep alive are various ways that you can keep light while deep within your ship. Now, the Phlogiston itself, because of its nature, that means when you're traveling in it, you can either travel very randomly, just try to explore it, or you can travel, of course, planned. The fact is, most rivers, you can either use them one way, or some of them are two ways. Most of them tend to be two ways, that you can travel one way and the back. So you could travel to another sphere and return back that way. Some of them aren't. You might have to take roundabout ways to get back home, because it's only a one-way trip down that thing. Down that river. Now, the Phlogiston itself, the spheres don't stay centered. They bob up and down slightly, almost like a bobber within water, but they also shift around. Now, you may say, well, wouldn't we lose track of them when we're traveling out in space? But you don't. Those rivers that connect them still stay connected. So though the sphere itself may change position, traveling, navigating between them, if you found a way to do it, stays exactly the same. That doesn't change. Again, so they're bobbing, they're moving. Spheres can get close to each other. They will never impact each other. The nature of the Phlogiston, it gets denser and denser as these two spheres approach each other until the point in time where it's so dense, they don't touch. They don't tap. They just then move back away. They're forced away by the very nature of the material they're floating and bobbing in. So, if it should ever start to happen, it will never really happen. They will not impact each other. Now, for stability's sake, we do know of the most stable position in all of here. Cairn space, Orth space, and Toral space form this almost triangle that they are stable with each other. Travel isn't always super easy between some of them, just for the natures of what's connected to what. They aren't connected all in a big triangle. You do have to kind of go, it's only like a partial triangle. It's basically an angle between them of easy travel of rivers. But nonetheless, they are stable and connected in this angle. So, when we talked about it before, we talked about leaving your atmosphere and getting an envelope of space. The fact is, the higher the atmosphere you go, the thinner the air. Eventually, you break into wild space and take some air with you. And when you take that air with you, if you're just a humanoid somehow getting out into space, you have between 2 and 20 rounds of breathable air. Now, let's say you're on a 100 cubic yard, 40-foot diameter rock. This rock, if it left space, would have approximately enough air for you for 4 months. Hey, go look at this there. So we've already gotten more air for you by throwing you out into space on a big rock. 40-foot diameter rock, so it's a pretty goddamn big rock, but a big rock nonetheless. If you're a larger creature than human, you take about twice the amount of air. Now we boil on to ships and how much air they bring. For approximately every ton a ship is, it will bring enough air for a single humanoid for 4 to 8 months of breathing. There we go. So every ton, 4 to 8 months per humanoid. So this also means that the lower end of any spelljamming ship, 1 ton. On the other hand, the upper end, well, there is an upper end to this based on size, but it's based on how well a helm can actually power the ship. If it's too big, the helm can't make it move. That's the big thing about it. Helm has only so much power when it comes to moving. So there is an upper end to the amount of tonnage you can have too, and that tells you the total amount of crew you can sort of have in between there, generally speaking, for that 4 to 8 month rule. This, of course, says we do know some basic math now. We can actually increase the amount of air, so increase the amount of time people are in there, or decrease it depending on the numbers of people. If you have 1 ton and 2 people, they're going to have 2 to 4 months. While if you have 2 tons And one person, they're going to have 8 to 16 months of air. So you can see how the persons to air to size of ship basically relate on the most basic level. Now, air itself, it comes in 3 qualities, 3 classes. Breathable, fresh, breathably fresh, fouled, deadly. They will transition between each other. Down the list, you'll go from your fresh, your fouled, to deadly. And of course, if you're trying to refresh it, it would go in the reverse if you're trying to refresh that air. Now, fresh air is just that. It's fresh air. You have no problems breathing it. This is if you're a single humanoid out in space, this is the 2 to 20 rounds you get. You get 2 to 20 rounds of fresh air. This is 4 months if you're aboard a ship. If you're having the standard crew complement, i.e. 1 crew member per 1 ton. Now, fouled. Fouled air is humid. It is sticky. It's smelly. There's just problems with it. If you're a creature or a crewmate trying to have to do ability checks, try to make attacks within fouled air, you get -2. It's just not good air to be within. This is after that 2 to 20 rounds, up until your 30th round. If you're just a humanoid out in space, it's fouled. Now, if you're a ship, this is anywhere after that. This is from your 5th month to your 8th month. It's fouled. So you can still function, it's just not pleasant. After that, it becomes deadly. Deadly is when if you're a humanoid out in space, from 31 on rounds, it's deadly. From the 9th month on for the ship, it's deadly. Every round, you must make a save basically against poison, because you're breathing in carbon dioxide, technically, even though we don't really talk about that much in Spelljammer. It is carbon dioxide. And the first time you fail a save, you go unconscious. Second time, you die. Now, a person that's unconscious from this can be given fresh or fouled air to refresh them. If you give them a whiff of actual air, it will wake them up again. You might still have to make saves if they don't have any more air, but still. This is why traditionally most trips are 4 months. Because 4 months is how much fresh air traditionally a ship should have. Now, if a ship is going longer than 4 months, they might plan for various stops in which they can refresh their air along the way. They also might have emergency situations in place to refresh their air. There are possible ways that they could do that also. Now, traditionally, you're not going to have to worry about air quality at all. This is going to be an emergency situation sort of thing that if things come up and you're going to have to worry about it, then we'll plan for it. If you are keeping check of it, there are some basic rules that you're going to follow. There are basically 2 methods you can use. The fast method and the accurate method. Each of these methods have their own merits. One, again, it's the faster one. It's a little easier that way. The other one is much more accurate, depending on how well you want to be. So the fast method is very simple. You have your standard crew complement. You're at your standard amount of air. As long as your crew complement does not change by any great amount, your air amount of air you have does not change. As soon as your crew reaches 25% more crew than what it would have been for the standard complement, you reduce the amount of months you have by 1. As soon as every time it goes up by another 25%, of course, it reduces it by an additional 1. Yeah, it goes a little crazy then if you kind of, again, space on a ship isn't that great, so you really couldn't go too much crazier than the air, maybe 25, maybe 50 at most. On the other hand, going down, every 25% you go down increases the amount of months. Traditionally, you're only going to have the 25% up, 25% down, and only worry about those. Beyond that, not enough space for too much above 25%. Below there, not enough crew to actually have the ship function. So there are problems that you will incur other than air after that. But simple for 25% more, -1 month. 25% below, +1 month. That's it. Now let's talk the accurate method. The accurate method, we just have to use a simple formula based upon the number of weeks remaining in air. Basically, you keep track of it to a degree week by week. So let's say you start with the full crew complement, you go a month. Let's say it's just 4 weeks go by, bam, we've checked them off, we have 4 less weeks on our trip. Now we have to see how much air we have because we just stopped somewhere and picked up a whole bunch of crew. We use a simple formula that is math. It is a relatively simple formula, but it is, again, math, so it is a little more intricate. You multiply the number of weeks you have remaining. You take the number of weeks you have remaining. You divide that by your current crew complement. And then you multiply it by your standard crew complement as it should be for the amount of tonnage you have. And that's how many weeks you have left. So you can easily go week by week. If your crew should massively change every week, then hey, I can math it. Figure out how many weeks of air. Basically, it's after a week goes by, I can figure out how much weeks I have after there. With changes, you kind of have to like look as to when you're going to make this math roll and figure it out. But yeah, as weeks go by, your air decreases and you can just use the formula. Again, it's more complex because it's math, but it's there. You can figure it out. But that's it for today. I first talked about, of course, the Phlogiston some more. I talked about your lighting in Phlogiston. I talked about travel a little bit more, but the fact that the spheres move out in space. But there's always a standard travel distance between them that makes it easy to move between them. So there is an advantage to traveling the Phlogiston in space. You can easily go from point A to point B regardless of how they shift around. Then I moved into talking about air. I talked about how much air you're going to bring with you no matter what you are, whether you're a person, a large creature, a big rock, or a ship. The ship rules for how much air you're bringing with you and how much air that relates to a single normal person, medium-sized creature on that ship. I then went into some basic details about how to figure out the quality of your air, how much time you're going to have in traveling, and how much air time basically you're having. So we went over air and all its glory for you, pretty much. In the next episode, we do want to talk about air just a little bit more. We almost finished it. And there are some more details about gravity we have to talk about because we've talked about it a bit. But there are some other important aspects that we really have to dive into before you know everything you need to know about space. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link in the description below. It has some great rewards that help to grow and improve the channel. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.